Uh, my career has been tremendously satisfying, full of the unexpected. It's been stopped and started. You're just going well, and then there's suddenly a change. Well, my name is Ron Manners. I guess I started off in Kalgoorlie, where I was born, and it's just interesting to consider Kalgoorlie back in the mid 1930s. We had no diversions. There was no TV, there was no social media. We really had to entertain ourselves and create our own fun. And we had lots of what would be regarded as unusual hobbies for today. One of our hobbies was at weekends we set rockets off. We were pretty good with explosives, having lived on the goldfields, and it was easy to buy the various implements for explosives you buy it from the grocer's shop. It's some pretty serious rockets. Sometimes we managed to go and reclaim the rockets. They land, we set them off on the dry Salt Lake pads. We could see where they went. It was interesting. I'm not sure if young people do much of that these days. I think I was 16. It was after school. Each day after the school had finished, I went and helped in my father's engineering business. And I was unpacking these boxes of mining equipment that we'd imported from the USA, and then there was no bubble wrap and no packing to keep the machinery from rubbing against each other. It was just crumpled up magazines, and they were the Friedman magazines produced by the Foundation for Economic Education. I liked what I read. It was a good self-responsibility. It was up with Thomas Jefferson and all the founding fathers of the US, I liked all that. And then about 2 years later, I got to be the editor of the School of Mines magazine. So I started using some of it. Probably Australianised it a little bit and started using it. And I got into a bit of trouble because it was a highly unionised town, and there was people saying, well, you can't make it on your own. The only way to make it in life is to become part of a union and use the union muscle to push other people aside so you can be successful. That didn't match up with what I'd been reading, so I started having some arguments with people. Ultimately, I wrote to the president of the Foundation for Economic Education. His name was Leonard E. Reid. I said, listen, mate, your ideas are getting me in a bit of trouble. What's going on? He wrote the most polite letter back and said, no, the ideas are okay. They've been probably started by Aristotle and been polished up by many people on the way through. And he said, if you're having a bit of trouble defending your position, it probably means you don't know enough about it. So you'll have to learn more. And with that in mind, I'll put you on our mailing list and you can get these magazines, and here's a few books to start with. And he said, if you ever got any questions, write to me. That was the beginning of the most remarkable friendship that I'd ever had. I think he became my mentor over all those years. I've collected all his letters. I used to ask short, sharp questions. He gave me long, lengthy answers, and it was really remarkable how a person like that invested his time in me on the other side of the world, and that's probably why I work very hard at answering a lot of questions, because I keep thinking, oh, Leonard E. Reid invested a lot in me. The School of Mines was probably the best thing that happened to me. It was an educational institute that replicated the subjects. The subjects were in during the day, then they replicated them at night, because most of us worked during the day, and we could go, and if we were on an odd shift, we would either go in the day courses for about 5 years. I think I went 5 nights a week, and it was pretty harrowing stuff. I first enrolled at the School of Mines, and I wanted to be a geologist. And the principal of the School of Mines said, no, manners, he said, mining's finished. Why go into mining? Better to go into engineering. And I accepted his advice. I always liked the electrical side, so I became an electrical engineer. And then later, when all this mining activity was happening, I realised, hey, I was going to float a public mining company. I needed that. I needed geology, so I went back, and I've been back to the School of Mines 4 times. I've enrolled there and added other dimensions to my education and so on. That's the sort of education that's extremely useful, and people need to be topping up their education all the way through their lives, all the way through their careers, because our careers change, the way we do things change, the knowledge that we need that's essential will be changing continually, and the things that you will be using in your career are probably not being taught today. So you'll be watch out for them and seize them and add them to your knowledge base. I think Hayek in particular and Milton Friedman have been a great influence on, I think, the economic way. I think Hayek was more of a philosopher than an economist, and his writings roll the whole subject of economics, politics, and philosophy together into one magnificent big ball with no divisions between each, because it's just one big, wonderful subject, which explains why we are and how we can improve and leave the place better than where we started, and that's called job satisfaction. I think Milton Friedman, to me, was one of the greatest communicators that I've ever met, and he always argued with a smile, and when he defeated people in debate or when he was arguing with you, he smiled as he was winning. and they were both extremely courteous people, Hayek and Friedman, totally different style. They came from different backgrounds, but remarkable, and it was just a pleasure to be in their company. I think it's pretty easy to say that I've never been busier in my life, but I split my time into 1/3 running the old family business, which has been, as I said, going for 125 years. We've designed it so that it should, no reason it shouldn't go for another 125 years. And 1/3 of my time is to help support the team here at the Mancow Foundation, which is, again, very satisfying. I can see the results. The more effort you put in, the more results come out the other end. So that's 2/3 of my time, and the other third I write. I'm not saying I'm a great writer. I've never been skilled at writing, but I write out of curiosity. That was So I Headed West. That's a book I talked about, so I could get to know my grandfather, who I never met, and the other we did the history of one of the famous prospectors of the goldfields, James Balzano. We put together his story. Never a Dull Moment was mainly covering my parents' time on the goldfields. And the Heroic Misadventures was a couple of my absolute disasters in business that was so disastrous they were comical. And there's some interesting articles in there. And the fifth book is a little poetry book full of little short poems. It's called Poems of Passion. This was written at a campfire in the Pilbara in 2007. It's called Pilbara Primetime. Remembering those legends, oh, what stories they could tell. Canning, Giles, Savoury and Carnegie, Calvert, de Grey and even Anketel. How privileged we are in this sparse, timeless land to follow the footsteps of that heroic band. Alec and Willie led us on to these exquisite places that have seen very little of pale human faces. Our thanks to them as we break our camp and head back to the daily grind. Please spare a thought for our friends in the city who will remain blind to what we've seen. What a pity.